All right, everybody, Michael Cohen here with you on the Sports Talk Nation, and it is a victory podcast here today as the Mets clinch their spot in the playoffs with one of the greatest games you will ever see. Whether you watched the game, whether you heard the game on radio, however you were following that game, it was and will go down as one of the greatest regular season games in baseball history. They're already talking about this being on MLB Network. Having that debate whether this was one of the greatest, if not the greatest, baseball game in the regular season, all because of stakes. You had two teams fighting for a spot in the playoffs. You had another team sitting back in Arizona waiting to find out if there was going to be a sweep of this series by one or the other that would allow Arizona to get in. There was so much riding on the line in this game, guys. I mean, we all know that. For most of this day, and this is going to be an example of why this Mets team is one of the most special Mets teams of all time. This was a team that was down 3-0 for 7+ innings. And even before that, you take a look, this was a team that had been scuffling down, coming down a stretch of the year last week or so of the season, lost a game in Atlanta last week, lost a couple of games in Milwaukee over the weekend. And there was that fear, that realistic fear, that this could go sideways and that this team might end up missing the playoffs. And what a heartbreak that would be, considering everything we had gone through this year. All the enthusiasm. Grimace, OMG, the team going on a huge winning streak and turning their season around in June. Then when they had a little bit of a lull in late July and August, finding another way to turn things around in late August when they had that big road trip out west and they won that series in Arizona and came back and won that series, going on another big run to take full control of their season. It has been an incredible year. The fan engagement, packed houses at Citi Field, light shows at Citi Field between innings. It's been an amazing season, and it would have been crushing to see it all come to an end. But there was part of us, let's just admit it, folks, a part of us even in the fan base that said, is this really going to fall apart again? Is this really going to fall apart again? We all thought it. We all thought that. And then the miracle happened. The miracle happened in that 8th inning as the Mets scored 6 runs in the 8th inning. I didn't know who saw that coming. Back-to-back doubles. Tyrone Taylor. I mean, you talk about another player who has come out of nowhere this year, whether it be a Jose Iglesias, whether it be a Doug Peterson, who many people kind of didn't think would be a big-time starter, turned out to be one of the Mets' best starters in this team. Tyler McGill, who pitched very well in this game to help them get this team into this spot. A lot of guys that the Mets and a lot of Met fans probably didn't think would be big contributors were, and Tyrone Taylor's another one. Gets a double to start off that 8th inning. Then Francisco Alvarez doubles, and all of a sudden Mets get a run back. And then slowly but surely the Mets get a couple more runs, and then Lindor gets a base hit, drives in a run. And then the Mets tie the game again. Jose Iglesias, the aforementioned one, tying the game on a base hit. And then eventually Mark Vientos, another player who was highly thought of in the minor leagues. Remember we had that debate, was it going to be Beatty? Is it going to be Vientos? Vientos, of course, grabbed the bull by the horns earlier in the year, and he has been that guy at third base. Gets the sac fly, puts the Mets in front 4-3. And then, of course, Brandon Nimmo. What can you say about this guy? I don't care that he hit .224 in the regular season. I know his batting average was lower than it was the year before. His 23rd home run of the year was one of the biggest of the year. And it gave the Mets a 6-3 lead. And then it all fell apart in that bottom of the 8th. It was just kind of the microcosm of things that have gone on and off this season, right? Start off poorly. Start off 0-5 on the year, right? And then, as I mentioned, had that great run in early June from June into July before tailing off again in early August and then rising to the top again. And that was the case in this game. Edwin Diaz and Phil Maton struggling in that 8th inning. And Diaz giving up the lead as the Mets fall behind. A 3-run double by Ozzie Albies as it puts the Braves all of a sudden in front 7-6. Their closers coming in. Here comes Pierce Johnson. You think to yourself, well, it's off to Game 2. This is going to be a situation where Mets have to win Game 2 just to keep their season alive. But then the MVP steps up, and that's Francisco Lindor. And he hits that 2-run bomb. And I don't know how many Met fans were there at Truist Park, but you could see just listening on the highlights, listening on television, listening on radio, it was a loud cheer. Met fans came to represent their franchise down there in Atlanta. Oh my goodness, they came out in droves. As the Mets take the lead 8-7. And then Edwin Diaz gets out of trouble. Ironically, gets Travis d'Arnaud, an ex-Met member of that 2015 team, striking him out in the ninth inning, and the Mets win the game. This has been an incredible run. Will it continue? We'll get to that in a moment, but just enjoy this. Soak this all in. I mean, I'm still soaking this in and trying to compartmentalize where this team is as far as its history, as far as Mets history is concerned, because this has been one of the most special teams they have ever had. This team's only made the playoffs 11 times in its 63-year history. And there's only so many teams that you look back on and say, this was a special team. You know, obviously 69 and 86 are two special teams. The 99-2000 teams were special teams. 2006 was a special year that unfortunately got cut off, as we all know, in the NLCS, a year that we all thought the Mets were going to win the World Series. And we all know how things fell apart in 07 and 08. 2015, that was the year that came out of nowhere. Who saw that coming, obviously, when that happened? And now here we are, 2 years removed from being in a situation where the Mets had the best record. Remember that 2 years ago in 2022? And fell apart at the end of the year. I think that's why the Mets fans were kind of questioning what would happen here today. And then ended up backing into the playoffs and getting knocked out by San Diego in the first round 2 years ago. This is a much different team. This is a better team because this is a more united team. This is a more cohesive unit. Maybe they don't have a lot of big stars in the starting rotation, and that's fine because these guys find a way to get the job done. These guys have found a way to get the job done all season long. Yes, you look at the numbers and you say, well, Pete Alonso's hitting 240 on the year. I mentioned Brandon Nimmo hit 224. J.D. Martinez hit 235. You lost Jeff McNeil for the year in September. This team just still found ways to win, and that's what it's all about. You saw it with that OMG, when the OMG song, that when Iglesias brought that song out and the players are enjoying it and enjoying the song, jumping up and down, dancing on the field, holding up the giant OMG sign. You knew there was a chemistry that we hadn't seen on this team in a very long time. And if this team could only find a way to get to the postseason, what could happen next? And here they are. What a job. Okay, you got to give a lot of credit to Carlos Mendoza. He done a phenomenal job in his first year as manager. Taking over for Buck Showalter. Remember, all of us were like, who's this guy coming from the Yankees, taking over for Buck Showalter, who 2 years ago was the manager of the year? Who's to say Carlos Mendoza can't be manager of the year this year for the Mets, the way things are going in baseball? Think about that for a second. And also, give a lot of credit to David Stearns, the executive vice president / GM of this team, to be disciplined as he was in some of the moves that he has made, and also give credit to what the Mets did last year. That's Steve Cohen, and yes, even Billy Epler. I know he's had his issues, and he's no longer with the organization. But when the Mets decided to tear things down last year and let go of Verlander and let go of Scherzer and restock a little bit in those minor leagues, and the way things have panned out for the Mets in that regard. And moving on from Jacob deGrom, not bringing him back, obviously, with the unfortunate with the injuries that he's had to endure over the last couple of seasons, this team has given itself an opportunity to flourish with younger players and to experiment, really to use Moneyball up to its name, especially in the pitching department. And they entrusted guys to get the job done, and they all had, whether it was a situation like today, down 3-0, somebody had the other one's back. Edwin Diaz implodes, somebody has his back. And that's what's so impressive about this team. There was always somebody that had the other one's back. So what will happen when the Mets go back to Milwaukee? And that's what's been so crazy about this whole thing. You go play in Atlanta last week. You had, of course, the Hurricane Helene that hit, and it forced this doubleheader that we had today. Go to Milwaukee over the weekend. You lose 2 in a row, then winning on Sunday. Then you have to go back to Atlanta. And you split this doubleheader, and now the Mets have to go back to Milwaukee again. And now here we go with the wild card series that begins immediately on Tuesday. And Luis Severino will get the start in Game 1. You imagine that Sean Manaea, I would think, would be the starter for Game 2, unless the Mets go with Quintana for Game 2 and say Manaea for Game 3. We'll see how that pans out if there is a Game 3. But whether the Mets find a way to beat Milwaukee and finally, kind of get that albatross off their back a little bit, Milwaukee went 5-1 against them in the regular season. This has been an incredible season. It's been one that will be remembered for a very, very long time. This is a team that got the job done. I mean, how many Met teams can you think of in the past that have won, not just won games and pulled games out the way they have, but won series consecutively and took care of teams that they needed to beat to get themselves to this point, having winning records against teams like Chicago and St. Louis and San Diego and Arizona, who ended up being the deciding factor getting into this wild card. Making a season series out of it with Philadelphia and Atlanta all year long. That's something we don't see often in Mets history. And this team did that. So, for however long this postseason run is going to be, whether the Mets win 2 out of 3 or get knocked out by Milwaukee here in this wild card round, as I said, this will be a season that's going to go down in Mets history for a very, very long time as being one of the best. And they have and it's not like it's over. They have laid the groundwork for future years. Steve Cohen, this entire team, they have put this team forward on a trajectory to be good for a while. And as I said in past videos, we'll address what the keys are the offseason are when we get there, whether it's, of course, Pete Alonso's contract, who are the starting pitchers come back next year. Jose Iglesias is another free agent, pending free agent. What do you do as far as bringing him back as a role player? What are you going to do at second base with McNeil? Those are questions that we'll answer down the road very soon in the offseason, but let's enjoy this ride, enjoy this night. And for however long this postseason ride continues, whether it's in Milwaukee, where it ends in Philadelphia, which is, I think, is a series we all would love to see. Would love to see the Mets take on the Phillies in the division series, should that come to pass. Oh my goodness, that would be great. One way or the other. And anything beyond that, it's obviously just, it's all gravy at this point as far as I'm concerned. What an incredible year. Let's go Mets, folks. Let's go Mets.